Hi, Allison here with another journal entry, this one to continue my train of thought about what's been ruining the subject of Trom, a problem we have been diligently fixing for the past year and a half. Don't worry if you missed the previous entry. Listen to it some other time if you want. Or just go to the Start Here section of our channel if you are a first-time viewer. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's say that I truly wanted to take down the Church of Scientology. Let's also say that I truly wanted to suppress Trom too. Just an intellectual exercise to help make a broader point later on. Well, if I really wanted to take down the Church of Scientology, and even ruin the subject too, I wouldn't do it by going online or on the news and just bitching about them to no end. That would be more of a strategy to make myself famous at the church's expense. Because I know for a fact that none of this bad press discourages existing members from doing services. It only firms their resolve. I would have to take the church down internally from a place high on the totem pole. I'd do it in such a way that made it appear to everyone watching that I was working hard to do everything I could to improve the church's statistics by selling people on ideas that would in fact crash them. I'd want to get rid of anyone who challenged my actions. I'd want to keep others in ignorance of the fact that my actions were wrong. One way I could do this would be to alter the Scientology technology to become less effective. But how do I do that without getting called out on it? Simple, I make anyone who would be wise enough to figure out what I'm doing want to leave the church. I'd replace those people with new members who I could indoctrinate into the less effective technology. In other words, those new people would practice squirrel technology and not even know it. Consider what happened with Golden Age of Tech. Everyone cheered at the event announcing it. Anyone who took the new and improved courses saw that they indeed were new and improved, and didn't alter L. Ron Hubbard's work in any way. All things being equal, the Golden Age of Tech courses, when they first came out, were a true blessing for Scientology technology. But they had a side effect, one well known to any church staff member tasked with recovering public who refused to come back on service. Anyone who trained with the older courses lost their status as auditors, and if they wanted to get it back had to do the Golden Age of Tech training at their own expense. A lot of trained Scientology auditors stopped practicing and refused to retrain because of this. I was one of those auditors. And I know I'm not the only one. So, this accomplishes the first phase of the plan. Get rid of old-timers who know how Scientology actually works and replace them with a new generation of Scientologists. Once this scene calms down, and the old-timers faded away, the next phase of the plan goes into effect. Now, under this same idea of Golden Age of Tech, we're going to start to alter the Scientology technology while still claiming to improve it. No one will know, because the old-timers won't be around to tell them. Sure, a few of them will still be around, but we'll just brush them off and tell them to write a report or something like that, and we'll just go back to teaching our squirreled courses, which lead to squirreled auditing, which leads to poor results, which leads to shrinkage. So, if you've ever wanted to take down the church, don't waste your efforts. They do a fine job of it all by themselves. And just in case you've never seen any of my videos before on this channel, I'm going to repeat, I don't want the church to fail. I want them to reform. And not the way they are doing now. Now let's say I wanted to take down Trom, I know how I would do that too. But to make this a little more entertaining, let's imagine that OSA, and that stands for the Office of Special Affairs, that's a branch of the Church of Scientology, had a meeting about Trom, and how they would go about defeating or at least minimizing it. Picture a handful of Sea Org members with a church executive standing in front of them in a conference room. Each of them with their coffee or cigarettes or vitamins, or all three to hand, getting ready to discuss strategies on how to handle Trom. One of them sits up straight in his chair, raises his hand to speak, then when the executive nods, he exclaims, "It's real simple. We just tell everyone that Trom is dangerous." I mean, everyone knows that anything other than Ron's work is dangerous to your mind, right? The guy next to him rolls his eyes. We've convinced our members of that. We can't convince the public. We're still trying to convince the public that Scientology is safe. The two Sea Orgs sitting across from the one with the bright idea close their eyes and nod, and the one who spoke up first slinks back in his chair an inch, letting out a deep breath in agreement. The executive points his finger at the second one who spoke up. We're brainstorming here. You don't have to invalidate Sam's communication every time he speaks. I mean, you are right, we still have to work on our credibility with the public, but that doesn't mean we can't somehow invalidate Trom. Sorry, says the second guy to the first guy. It's okay, the first guy says, then turns to the executive and asks, does anyone up the lines have any bright ideas? Not really, but what you just said gives me one. Maybe we can convince the public Trom is no good some other way. Not by making it look dangerous, but by making it look foolish. Trom is foolish, for sure, one of the members from the opposite side of the table interrupts. The executive's eyes dart to the man who spoke out of turn. It may be squirrel, but it's not foolish. I read the materials last night, and while I don't buy into it, someone else who knows their Scientology might. The fourth man, silent until now, takes a drag of his cigarette, pops a vitamin bomb and washes it down with some coffee, and adds, so Trom is dangerous, but only to us. The third man chimes in, I read it too. A blast of surprise flashes on the executive's face. Don't worry. I just read it. I didn't try any of the exercises. For your sake, that's a good thing, the executive sighs with relief. You'd be in ethics for a month if you did. The executive paces the room. He points to the one with the cigarette, the coffee, and the empty vitamin pack. Jim, get on your iPhone and see what you can find on Trom while we continue our discussion, okay? Jim complies, and the rest continue talking. A few more minutes of deliberation pass, and the executive says, okay, now we have a plan. We can't attack Trom directly, because if we do, the public will just get more curious about it. Whether or not it's effective, it doesn't matter. It only matters whether or not the public believes that. I see our only course of action is to have one of our people set up a website for Trom, making it look like a foolish activity thrown together by semi-literates, and people will stay away from it. The first guy injects, it's a great plan, but someone might discover we deliberately tried to sabotage the subject, and that will just make others more sympathetic to the Trommers. We have to risk it, the executive responds. Suddenly, the man with the iPhone stands up with a smile. Guys, we don't have to do a thing. I found something on the internet that solves all our problems. The executive turns on the big screen in the corner of the conference room. Cast it so we can all take a look. And what do the five men witness? They witness tromhelp.org. And after a few minutes of the OSA staff member explaining the site, all of them agree they have nothing to worry about. Looks like someone out there is doing our work for us, the executive comments. Okay guys, let's move on to more important matters, like how we're going to handle this Masterson rape case fiasco. The mood turns serious once more, and the meeting continues. As promised in the previous journal entry, I will now provide an overview of the tromhelp.org's website and comment on its content. Once again, Peter, you had your chance to correct all this. Here we go. In the lower left corner of the first page is a link to the site Antology. I know personally from having corresponded with Ant that he is no ally to Trom, and even referred to it as a distraction, a pile of dung on the road he was traveling, which is Scientology. He didn't have anything flattering to say about Dennis Stevens either. On the second page of his site, he links to videos put out by the Yon guy, as if these are some sort of substitute for the first set of exercises one does in Trom. I watched some of these videos. I won't say one way or another if what the Yon guy is teaching is valid, it's just not Trom, that's all. On the third page, entitled Services, in the right column is a list of recommended reading. One of those books is Scientology, Fundamentals of Thought, the only one from his list I would ever recommend on a website that declared itself an authority on Trom. After all, Trom has roots in Scientology, and it's never a bad idea to do a little reading on the older subject, even though it's not absolutely necessary to the study of Trom, at least not the way I teach it. I've read the book Finite and Infinite Games and thought it was a cool book and all, but there are some concepts in it that come at odds with Trom. I also have a big problem with recommending the Sedona method as some sort of introduction to levels 2 and 3 of Trom. To set the record straight, the only true introduction to levels 2 and 3 of Trom is Trom level 1. Dennis warns that someday someone will take level 2 of Trom and turn it into something milder and useless. Well, Pete isn't exactly doing that, but he's about a step away from it. I have nothing bad to say about the Sedona method. It's just not Trom. And suggesting to people that after level 1 they should try the Sedona method before going on to levels 2 and 3 just delays them getting on to those levels, and I am sure some people will just embrace the Sedona method and never look at Trom again, thus missing out on the tremendous gains they can get from Trom level 2. Once again, I have nothing against the Sedona method. I am only trying to defend the integrity of my spiritual practice. As far as the 2 supplemental lectures pages are concerned, let's start with how supplemental is spelled with a T, and that typo should be corrected. It's been there for at least 6 years, and even when Pete lost his tromhelp.com domain and transferred his site over to tromhelp.org, instead of taking the opportunity to clean up some errors on his site, like that one, he just made a copy of it, errors and all. He claims the lecture transcripts and books are professionally edited. Maybe they were edited by some kind of professional, but not any kind of professional editor or transcriber worth their salt. I'll just stick with one example of a recurring transcription error. In Trom, we have the concept of complementary postulates. To give you a quick definition, that's 2 ideas or intentions that agree with each other. It's spelled complementary, with an E, which means to complete. I lost count of how many times it's spelled with an I in these transcripts. Think this is just nitpicky bitching? I had to straighten out someone on the definition of complementary postulates once because they thought that complementary postulates had something to do with paying someone a compliment. Anyone familiar with Scientology study technology knows that such misunderstandings, however minor they may appear, can snowball into greater misunderstandings in later study. Now we get to the books section of the site. Other than the main book, The Resolution of the Mind a Games Manual, the rest of the books are just lecture transcripts repackaged for sale on Amazon. It's actually not such a bad idea if not so poorly executed. He could have filled the books with annotations and illustrations, put a full glossary in, and made something truly worth buying. Instead, the same poor transcribing I mentioned before is in those books, and the glossaries are sorely lacking. The introductory chapters of his version of the original Trom manual are unnecessary to the work. They will confuse most, if not all, laymen to the point where they will put the work down before even getting to the main section of it. And this is not some theory. Others have told me this is exactly what they did. So congratulations, Peter. You made an edition of Trom that repels people from the subject. I have no issues with the last page of the site. Peter, if you want to practice multiple spiritual practices, that's your business. If you want to put up a site that promotes multiple spiritual practices, you can do that too, as long as you honestly label it that way. But please, don't put up a site that leads others to believe that progressing through the levels of Trom involves a combination of Trom, the Sedona method, and Yongai videos. I also know that if you took the time to proofread your books and your site, you would get more book sales and more support for Trom. People would take the subject more seriously. I discovered these flaws about 5 or 6 years ago. Why have I stayed silent about them all this time? I wanted to be fair to Peter and give him a chance to correct them. I also didn't want to warn people away from the site unless I could provide them with somewhere else to go. And now I have one. Now I can finally say something. Publicly. Instead of reading Pete's unnecessarily complicated book, you can read Trom 2023, which you can download from this video's description. Instead of struggling with typo-ridden transcripts, you can read them off of the work entitled Trom the Full Package. You can listen to the lectures on the Mind Resolution YouTube channel. Additionally, you have all the instruction videos on DIY salvation, something the likes of which never existed before in the history of Trom. Now that's Trom help that actually lives up to Peter's supposed intent. In closing, I would like to say that Peter can still correct all of these mistakes. I'd even help him if he could get over my criticisms. He could make a truly helpful website that would be a shining beacon for Trom's study and benefit everyone, including him. I would love that. And it would save me the trouble of having to construct a website of my own. Don't think I won't if this sloppy representation of Trom continues. Straighten out your books and your site, Peter, and I'll change my tune about you as soon as I confirm it. It'll be a song of praise for your hard work rather than a criticism of your negligence. You can write me at tromguides@gmail.com to inform me of the work. You can address it to Roger, Allison, David, Brett, Rowan, Waylon, Mary, Philip, James, Tromfan, or any of the other aliases I use online. It's been so long since I first wrote you, I actually don't remember which one it was. If I can put 1,000 hours of work into my YouTube channel, you can put a few days of work into fixing your site and your books. You're listening to Allison's audio journal on DIY salvation. Don't just use your mind. Resolve it.